Arguments with rude people who refuse to listen to you are the worst. So in this video, you'll learn how to calmly handle those arguments using a simple 3-step process. Step 1 is exposing the flawed premise. That means noticing when the conversation starts turning into an argument. One way this can happen is through implied frames in questions. Implied frames are opinions disguised as facts. People can sometimes sneak these into their questions. Answering a question like this at face value is tough because you automatically have to get defensive even if you have a strong position. The way to answer these types of questions is to separate facts from frames. Here Dr. Jaishankar is asked about why India imports oil from Russia despite sanctions and if that position will change. First, watch how he sets up facts without any judgment or evaluation.
The European Union between February 24th and 17th November has imported more fossil fuel from Russia than the next 10 countries combined.
Once he's laid out the facts in clear terms, then he gives his interpretation of those facts.
The remark that you made that, this is the way the European Union is going and this is the way India is going, I would very respectfully suggest maybe European Union is actually doing something very much more than India is doing it.
Another way you can get trapped in arguments is when someone misrepresents your views.
But you and Prime Minister Modi have already said that regularly call on both sides to stop the war and to negotiate. However, can one really urge Ukraine to stop defending itself? After all, there are no Ukrainian tanks in Russia. There are Russian tanks and planes and missiles destroying Ukraine.
These subtle mischaracterizations are tough to catch in real time, and they require you to be listening very carefully. But the simplest thing you can do here is to clarify your views before you start defending yourself.
I think that's a bit of a misrepresentation. I think what we do is to say, get back to dialogue and diplomacy.
But even if you clarify your views, you can still fall for the third trap, which is false dichotomies. False dichotomies are a logical fallacy where your options are falsely limited.
Would you consider India an ally of Russia?
On the surface, you might think that the answer to that is a simple yes or no, but neither of those options align with his point. That's why he goes one level higher and responds like this.
No, I think India we are an independent country. We do not define ourselves or perceive ourselves in alliance terms. That's very much a Western terminology. It's not a term that we use.
False dichotomies are way more common than you think. Think of a negotiation where someone is trying to lowball you or a client that is asking you to lower prices. On the surface, it might seem like your only options are to take the deal or walk away. But instead, if you view this as a false dichotomy, you can add a condition to renegotiate in 12 months based on specific criteria. Or with the client, you can say, I'm willing to concede on price if you introduce me to a friend or give me a testimonial. Each week, I cover habits like these that will help you become the most confident version of yourself on my weekly email newsletter. Click the link in the description to join it now. But catching these false dichotomies becomes easier when you're physiologically calm, which brings us to the next point. Anxiety, anger, nervousness, they can take over in an argument and then your argument will get hostile and you will risk damaging the relationship. To avoid that, you need to master the 3 to 6 pause.
Look, number one, why I wanted to interrupt you in a way. I mean, I'm partly reacting to the previous observation.
The 3 to 6 pause is a specific type of pause where you stop speaking, inhale for 3 seconds and slowly exhale for 6 seconds. That will instantly calm you down. Once you have calmed down, attack the content of the question but not the character of the person. At the most basic level, this means making it clear that you are not personally attacking anyone.
It's an interesting question which you might, not you meaning you personally, but people might want to ask themselves
But it also means allowing the other person to save face. Dunking on people looks good when you're watching, but it will kill your relationship with the person. People resist being told that they are wrong because it challenges their self-esteem and beliefs. But if you want to persuade someone to see things your way, the best way I know how is to create consistency. There is a strong tendency in all of us to remain consistent with ourselves, to not look like hypocrites. So instead of trying to change someone's mind, take their logic and accept it as true. Then use their logic in a different context to make your point.
Somewhere Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems.
Here his point is that the war in Ukraine is complex and that the way out is diplomacy.
But is this a complicated situation? Is this really complicated? There's just one big country invading its neighbor.
No, look, I can give you many instances of countries who have violated the sovereignty of another country. If I were to ask where Europe stood on a lot of those, I'm afraid I'll get a long silence.
He agrees and takes the interviewer's point that one country invading the sovereignty of another is bad, and then uses that principle to make his point. That way, it's hard for anyone to disagree with him because they would essentially be arguing against themselves. Now watch this question to see how his options are being framed for him.
The West seems to be quite vociferous in trying to curtail funding for the war in Ukraine, whereas by purchasing this oil for national interest, India is being asked, are you funding this war?
In his response, he will, for argument's sake, accept the logic that buying oil from Russia is funding the war, and then he will apply that logic to point out how that reasoning is flawed.
Tell me if buying Russian gas is not funding the war? I mean, why is it's only Indian money and oil coming to India which funds, but it's not gas coming to Europe which funds?
One problem you still might run up against is that your mind will go completely blank in conversation. Watch this video to learn how to avoid that from happening.